上人人微妙法約千万語難遭遇我根検問特十字願言如来真実義無上人人微妙法約千万語難遭遇我根検問特十字願言如来真実義。消防現像行事の話の続きをしたいと思います。今日は岩波文庫では360ページの後ろから4行目、今の見物というところからです。今の見物文法は、仏祖面々の行事よりきたれる慈恩なり、仏祖もし単伝せずはいかにしてか今日にいたらん。一句の恩なほ報謝すべし。一法の恩なほ報謝すべし。いはんや正法眼蔵無上大法の大恩。これ報謝せざらんや。一日に無量豪華者の身命すてんこと願うべし。法のためにすてんかばねは、世世のわれら、かへりて礼拝供養すべし。諸天龍神ともに恭敬尊重し、守護讃歎するところなり。道理それ必然なるがゆえに。西天竺国には、髑髏をうり髑髏をかう婆羅門の法、ひさしく風聞せり。これ、文法の人の髑髏形骸の功徳大きことを尊重するなり。今、道のために身命を捨てざれば、文法の功徳いたらず、身命を顧みず、文法するがごときは、その文法従熟するなり。この髑髏は尊重すべきなり、今我ら道のために捨てざらん髑髏は、他日にさらされて野下に捨てられるとも、たれかこれを礼拝せん、たれかこれを埋埋せん。今日の証拠顧りて恨むべし。鬼の仙骨を打つありき、天の仙骨を来せしあり。いたずらに人道に消するときを思いやれば、今の愛釈なし、後の憐れみあり。催さるるところは、民人の涙のごとくなるべし。いたずらに人道に決して人にいとわれん髑髏をもて、よく幸いに仏性棒を行事すべし。このゆえに、寛空をおずることなかれ、苦い寛空、いまだ人を破らず、寛空いまだ道を破らず、ただ不習をおずべし。不習、それ人を破り、道を破る。暑熱をおずることなかれ、 諸熱いまだ人を破らず、諸熱いまだ道を破らず、不習よく人を破り道を破る。麦を受け、わらびを取るは同族の消直なり。父を求め、父を求めて、鬼畜に習わざるべし。ただまさに行事なる一日は諸仏の安理なり。これは今日のところです。ダルマさんについて書かれた部分の最後のところです。英語でも読んでまいります。Somebody asked yesterday at the tea meeting where you can find the Shobo Genzo. We have several in the library, the Nishijima translation. I think there's also a version of the Yokoi translation, which is kind of rare, and we have the Nishiyama translation, which is different from the Nishijima. If you're looking for it on the internet, the easiest way is to just Google for Shobo Genzo, and then you scroll downwards. And you can go directly to the Shasta Abbey translation. There's a PDF, or you go to this one, the Zen site. And according to the chapter, sometimes you have several choices, but you have a link both to the Shasta Abbey and you got a link to the Nishijima translation. If you go to Dogen's teachings, and here you got from volume 1 to volume 4, just in case you don't know how to find these. And there's several other, like if you're into Dogen texts, there's lots of links here to other sites here. So this would be the Shasta Abbey version. And this would be the Nishijima version. Let's have a look at the Nishijima version. It's on the PDF, it's page 213. On the right side, I got this mark 138b. It's above from there. We should repeat the it starts in the middle of the text. There's this sentence: if the Buddhist patriarchs had not passed on the one-to-one transmission. Last month, I think I was talking about the seals of the office of Yofu. It's something to do with a turtle returning a favor. And well, I don't know if you can find it, but the last sentence last month was: our meeting Buddha and hearing Dharma in the present. No, that's the first one today. Our meeting Buddha and hearing Dharma in the present is benevolence that has come from the conduct and the observance of every Buddhist patriarch. If the Buddhist patriarchs had not passed on the one-to-one transmission, how could it have arrived at the present day? We should repay the kindness contained in even a single phrase. We should repay the kindness contained in even a single Dharma. How then could we fail to repay our debt of gratitude for the great blessings of the right Dharma I treasury, the supreme great methods? We should desire to forsake in a single day bodies and lives as countless as the sands of the Ganges. To the dead body we have abandoned for the sake of the Dharma, we ourselves will return in age after age to make prostrations and serve offerings. And it will be venerated, honored, guarded, and praised by all gods and dragons. For the truth of abandonment for the Dharma is inexorable. Rumors have long been heard from India in the West of the Brahmans' custom of selling skulls and buying skulls. They honor the great merit in the skull and bones of a person who has heard the law. If we fail now to abandon body and life for the truth, we will not attain the merit of hearing the Dharma. If we listen to the Dharma without regard for body and life, that listening to the Dharma will be fulfilled, and this very skull will deserve to be honored. Skulls that we do not abandon today for the truth will someday lie abandoned in the fields, bleaching in the sun. But who will do prostrations to them? Who would want to sell or buy them? We might look back with regret upon the spirit that we showed today. There are the examples of the demon that beat its former bones, and the god that prostrated itself to its former bones. When we think on to the time when we will turn emptily to dust, those who are without love and attachment now will gain appreciation in future. The emotion aroused might be something akin to a tear in the eye of a person looking on. Using the skull that we will turn emptily to dust and which may be abhorred by people, fortunately we can practice and observe the Buddha's right Dharma. So never fear the cold. Suffering from the cold has never destroyed a person. Suffering from the cold has never destroyed the truth. Only be afraid of not training. Not training destroys a person and destroys the truth. Not training can destroy a person and can destroy the truth. Never fear the summer heat. The summer heat has never destroyed a person. The summer heat has never destroyed the truth. Not training can destroy a person and can destroy the truth. The acceptance of barley and the gathering of bracken are excellent examples from the Buddhist world and the secular world. We should not be like demons and animals, thirsting after blood and thirsting after milk. Just one day of conduct and observance is the actual practice of the Buddhas. So here ends the part about Bodhidharma that I've been talking about for the last couple of months. It's pretty long. It's the longest one in the whole Yoji chapter, so it's even longer than the part on the Buddha or all of the other patriarchs. Probably because Dogen Zenji was especially identifying with Bodhidharma's bringing the Dharma from India and risking his life and giving up his comfortable life in India to live far away, also from the Chinese capital at the time, retreat to the mountains and just sit in the mountains. So it's probably not an accident that Dogen Zenji wrote this chapter when he was contemplating to move from Kyoto, the capital, the Japanese capital at the time, deep into the mountains. And people probably around him and the students were asking, well, why don't you do that? It's much easier to practice the Dharma and to preach the Dharma in the capital. Why would you want to go to the mountains and where you have nobody to preach to except the monkeys and you don't know what you're going to have to eat? Okay. まずはじゃあ日本語でちょっと意味を考えたいと思います。今の見物文法は私たちが今現に仏法に出会えて、教えを聞くことができるのはひとえに仏祖面々の行事よりきたれる慈恩なり。ひとえに、仏祖方がおのおの修行に励んでそれを伝えてきたおかげである。 仏祖もし単伝せずはいかにして今日に至らん。もし仏祖方がこうして、マンツーマンで一人から一人へ、器から別の器に液体を移すように伝えてこなければ、どうしてこの仏法が今日に至ったんであろうかという意味です。私が毎月宮園智源寺で講義している弁道は、というテクストがありますけれども、その最初にも似たような話が出てきます。諸仏如来ともに妙法を単伝して髑髏を称するに最上無位の妙術あり。これただ仏に授けて横島なることなきは、すなわち自由三昧その標準なりという有名な言葉から始まるんですけれども、つまり私たちが今修行している、自由三昧という言葉で表されているけれども、自分が生きているこの命を受け止めて、それに生かされているということに気づいた上、それを存分に生かすという三昧。これは釈尊から今日までの仏祖方が一人からまた一人へ伝えてきたおかげだからこそ、自分に今届いている。で、自分もそれを受けて実践していれば、この仏祖方とつながって、この伝統の一人になること、ができるということだと思います。今の見物門法は仏祖面々の行事よりきたれる慈恩なり、仏祖もし単伝せずはいかにして今日に至らん。一句の恩なを報謝すべし、一法の恩なを報謝すべし。仏祖方のそういう修行がもしなかったならば、私たちは今日それが実践できない。なので、法恩のつもりで、この恩返しのつもりで、仏たちの一句一句の恩を返し、一方一方の恩を返すべき。先月話したように、亀ですら、スズメですら、人間に恩返しをしたという例は、伝われているので、人間である自分が恩返しをせずしてはどうするんだということでしょう。いはんや正法眼藏無上大法の大恩。一句一方ですら恩返しを忘れてはいけない。ならば正法眼蔵無上大法の大恩。これを報謝せざらんや。どうしたらこの恩を返さずにはいられるんであろう。一日に無量恒河沙の神妙、恒河沙という難しい言葉が出てきますけれども、インドにあるガンゲスという大きな川の砂ほど多くの風の命、それはどうやら、数学ではこれもしくはこれという、気が遠くなるほど大きい数らしいけれども、私たちは今命一つしかないけれども、たくさんあっても全てそういう命の全てをかけて願うべし、それを捨てんことを願うべし、この命の全てをかけて恩返しをすることを願うべしであると。法のためにすてんかばねは、世世のわれら帰りて礼拝供養すべし。そうして仏法のために我が身を、また我が心を投げ出せば、世世の我ら帰りて礼拝供養すべし。すべてのものが、 それに感謝をするであろう。それは人にも認められるであろう。諸天龍神、人間だけではなく、神様ですら、苦行を尊重し、守護、参拝するところなり、道理それ必然なるがゆえに。西天竺国には、ドクロをうりドクロを買う婆羅門の法、ひさしく風聞せり。ここ、インドの話が出てきます。私はインドに行ったことはないんですけれども、聞いた話では今でも、優れた行者の骨は非常に亡くなった後に大事にされて高い値段で売られているとは、そういう話聞いたことあります。道元禅師の時代でも道元禅師の耳にそういう噂は入った。つまりインドでは、ドクロを高く売ってこのドクロを、高い値段で買うバラモンたちがいるらしい。誰のドクロでもいいわけではなくて、ちゃんと仏の法を聞いてそれを実践した人のドクロでこそ、そういうふうに大事にされる。これ文法の人のドクロ、形骸の功徳大きいことを尊重するなり、ちゃんと法を聞いた人のそういうドクロは非常に大事にされている。今道のために身命を捨てざれば文法の功徳至らず。私たちはこの一生の間、自分の命を投げ捨てて法を聞くことがなければ、当然ながら功徳を積むことができない。だから身命を顧みず文法するがごときは、その文法成熟するなり。しかし自分の命をかけて文法をすれば、その功徳によって文法が成熟をし、このドクロは尊重すべきなり。自分が死んだ後のこのドクロもおそらく人々に大事にされるんであろう。今我ら道のために捨てざらんドクロは他日にさらされて野外に捨てられるとも、誰かこれを礼拝せん、誰かこれを埋々せん。もし私たちが一生の間に仏道のために自分を捨てることがなければ、どうせいつかは死んでこの頭がドクロに変わるんだろうけれども、仏道のために自分を捨てたことのない人はドクロになったとしても、それはその辺で捨てられてさらされて野外に捨てられるとも、誰がこれを礼拝せん。誰がそんなやつ、そんなしょうもない凡夫のドクロを礼拝するんであろう。誰がそれに金を出して買おうと思っているだろうかと。今日の証拠、顧みて恨むべし。つまり、そうして一生の間、怠けて、本気になって自分の命を投げ出さない、そういう凡夫の根性、これをここで証拠、今日の証拠という言葉で表せているけれども、そういう私たちの凡夫の根性を顧みて恨むべし。これを恨みなさいというわけです。自分の怠け心を恨んでしまえ。で、次の文章に鬼と天という言葉が出てきますけれども、鬼の仙骨を打つありき、天の仙骨を来せしあり。鬼はなぜ鬼になったかというと、自分を道のために捨てたことがない。自分を仏道のために捨てたことのない人は、来世はアシュラになったり、畜生になったり、鬼になる。 で、その時点ではもう遅いので、来世の自分の骨に理学壊したときは、なんでお前が、つまり自分、なんでお前が前世においてもっと励んでくれなかったかと、そういう意味で仙骨を打つ。自分の骨、前世の自分の骨を蹴って、お前がもうちょっと頑張ってくれたらいいのにというわけですね。天というのは天上界に生まれた人。なぜ天上界に生まれたかというと、来世においてちゃんと頑張ったおかげで天に昇れた。そういう人は天の仙骨を礼拝せしありと。天上界に生まれた人が前世人間として頑張ったその骨、お骨に出会ったときはありがとう、ご苦労様だと。前世のお前たち、この骨、この骨のおかげで根性の私がここにいるんだと。つまり根性において自分を捨てててこそ先がある。いや、命が惜しいと思って自分を捨てないのであれば、後々は後悔するんであろうという、そういう話、だと思います。いたずらに人道に消するとき、思いやれば今の愛釈なし、後の憐れみあり。どうせいずれかは土に帰るんであろう。それを思えば、今自分が執着しているすべてのものを失ってしまう。そして残るのは憐れみだけである。催されるところは民人の涙のごとくなりべし。そうして自分が死んでしまった後はもう今のすべての悩み苦しみは、赤の谷の涙のようなものであったとようやく気づくんだろう。いたずらに人道に決して人にいとわれんどくろをもてよく幸いに仏性棒を行事すべし。どうせいずれは死ぬんだろうならば、その私が死んだ後、自分が死んだ後のドクロが人々に大事にされるように、今せっかく仏性棒、仏の正しい教えに出会ったわけだから、それを行事すべし。ぜひとも辛くても実践すべきである。このゆえに寒空をずることなかれ。だから冬の寒さを恐れてはいけない。なぜならば寒空いまだ人を破らず。この寒さによって人が破れたことはない。寒空によって仏像が破れるということはない。どんなに寒くてもそれによって殺されることがない。ただ復讐を押すべし。修行しないこと、それこそ恐れるべきである。なぜならば修行しないことによってこそ人が破り、道が破られる。寒熱、暑熱については同じです。暑さ、夏の暑さも暑さが恐ろしいわけではない。なぜならばこの暑さによって自分が死ぬのではない。暑さによって道が、消えるわけではない。実践しないことによって自分は破り、道が破れる。 麦を受け、わらびを取るはという出てきますけれども、ある時にインドで釈尊が旅の最中に90日暗号をしたけれども、食べ物がなくて馬用の麦を、釈尊とその弟子たちを食べた。で90日の暗号の間しのいだという話があります。わらびというのは、中国で戦いに敗れた人たちが敵の奴隷になるのは嫌で山に逃げて、そこでわらびばっかりを、食べてしのいでたという話から来ているらしいんです。麦を受けわらびを取るは同族の、小宿なり、麦というのは銅ですね。仏道を修行した人たち。わらびの場合は、俗人、在家の人たちですけれども、優れたそういう昔の例えもありますよ。知を求め、父を求めて。知というのはおそらく肉のことですね。道元禅師の時はどうだったかわからないけれども、都にいればたまには親戚から差し入れがあって、肉食べることもあったかもしれない。牛乳も飲めたかもしれない。福井の山に入ったらそういうものも口に入らなくなるんだろう。だけれども、そういうものが欲しいと思っていれば、それは所詮鬼畜でしかない。知を求め、父を求めて鬼畜に習わざるべし。そんな鬼畜の真似をするな。ただまさに行事なる一日は諸仏の行理なり。ただ一日だけでも、今日という一日だけでも仏たちに倣って仏たちの真似をして、この今日という一日を仏のように過ごすべきであると。ここで、ダルマさんのパートが終わってしまいます。I would like to say some things in English next. First of all, I'm giving this talk on the Gyoji chapter once each month before the 5-day sessions, and every 5 days we have a talk on the Shobogenzo Zuimonki. I think somewhere on the Antaji homepage it says that these talks are in Japanese, but most of them are in half English, or sometimes the whole talk is in English. Which is because, well, right now there's only one Japanese person here. So most people here are not native Japanese speakers, and most people actually don't speak any Japanese at all. So it's only natural that part of the talk is in English, and those people who give a talk and don't speak Japanese, then naturally they give their talk in English. On the other hand, I've been saying that also a number of times already. It's kind of strange that we come to Japan to study the teaching of Dogen, who wrote in Japanese. We do it in Japan together with Japanese practitioners, but then we end up doing it in English. Why would you do it in English? If you want to do it in English, you could do it in America and Europe. There's other places where you could study Dogen's teaching in English. You would have it easier. So if you think that there's a strong reason why you want to practice Zen in Japan, you should speak a certain amount of Japanese. Learning to read Dogen in the original takes quite a good amount of time. But that doesn't mean that, well, you shouldn't make the effort. I often get mails. Just the other day I got another mail like people say, well, I'm a little bit above the age limit, but I'm still pretty strong, and I don't speak any Japanese yet, but I will learn as much as possible before I come to Antaiji, and then I can study when I'm actually in Japan. And I'm usually quite good with languages. Is that okay? And all of you who are here already probably know it's not so easy. Maybe some of you who came here thought the same. Okay, I don't speak Japanese so well, but I can study once I'm there. But for one thing, once you're here, you don't have so much time to study. It's not that you have no time at all, but you do not have much time, and if you have nothing to start with, so basically you speak no Japanese right from the start, it means that everybody needs to speak with you in English, and there's nothing you can really grasp on. It's hard to make any progress if you come with zero Japanese. It's still possible, but you have to put in a lot of effort. Some things that are important is, for example, you need to become able to answer the telephone. You need to be able to greet guests when they come. If you need to go to the hospital, you need to be able to communicate with the doctors and the nurses. And also, these study hours might not be the most important part of our practice, but it's also one important part of practice. So it's impossible to read Dogen in the original right from the start, but if you think seriously about staying here long, you should also try that. So I'm sometimes surprised that even the people who speak a certain amount of Japanese already, when they give a talk on the Zuimonki, not only do they give the talk in English, but they don't even make the effort to try to read it. So it's always, please Eko-san, can you read it? Please Dosen-san, can you read it? Can some of the Japanese please read the text? Although it's hard work, I would, if I would be you and I wanted to learn Japanese, I would also try out to actually have a look at the original. And looking up all these Chinese characters is hard work, but it's not impossible. And that's how you learn. And if you say, well, why should I waste my time on that? The Japanese, for them, it's much easier. You're ending up wasting their time. On the other hand, you could ask, well, why do the Japanese have to sit through a 1 hour talk that's only in English? If you think it's too much to ask, to prepare looking at the original text and trying to read the Zuimonki parts that are given to you every 5 days are usually not so long. Here is where you can find them on the internet. The address above is where you would find the whole of Shobo Genzo. You also have it in these Iwanami. Well, there's the whole library is full of Shobo Genzo texts and comments on the text. The easiest available is this Iwanami version. This is the big print for people with not so good eyesight, but then we also have the small one, the Zuimonki size. But if you want to access it on the internet, the first address, Shomonji, there you have the whole Shobo Genzo on the internet. And the one below, this ehezenjimdo.com, also has a lot of Dogen texts, including the Zuimonki. There's also the Tenzo Kyokun on this site. There's the Gakudo Yoshinshu. There's a lot of, well, minor Dogen texts. And if you go here, this would be the Zuimonki. We also have this in the Iwanami Bunko version, of course. But if you go through this, the internet version, like here you got the numbers. Usually whenever you're in charge of the monkey text, you got the chapter numbers, and those are the same ones that we're using. Like, for example, you have chapter 1.1, for example. And here you got your text. And if you know hiragana, you already have half of that. And the rest you have to look up, but basically you just copy it and then you Google it. And you would, well, you would somehow get to the how you read it. I mean, in this case, it's kind of difficult because, well, just as the Wikipedia here entrance says, there's lots of readings. Tsuitachi, ichinichi, ichijitsu. In this case, it would be the third version. You read it ichijitsu. Things like that you have to either look up, or in the Iwanami Bunko version, often you have the so-called furigana. You have by the side, it tells you how to read it. So it's not impossible. It takes some time, but compared to when I came here, there was no internet. So what you had to do, you had to basically look all the characters up in these thick character dictionaries, and you had to count the strokes, and you had to find out which is the radical. Sometimes you spend 30 minutes until you found out how you read the characters or what's the meaning. And even like a kind of difficult one like this one, you just copy it and you put it into Google, and it tells you what this is. Well, in this case, actually, because it's a difficult one, because I mean, this one here refers to the location in China, or it could even be Korea in this. Zoku ko so den no naka ni zoku. So this one here is difficult because it's one of the old characters, but even that Google should know that this is zoku, which means continued, Victionary. Like this one, I use this a lot. Victionary gives you all the readings of these characters, the meaning, of course, the Chinese meaning, and then the Japanese meaning. And you have this in other languages as well. So this is the Japanese page, but you can look it up in English if you want to. And here there's the Chinese one. You don't want the Chinese reading, but it gives you the Japanese as well. Japanese kanji, and zoku would be in this case, how you pronounce it. Ichijitsu shimeshite iwaku zoku koso den no naka ni aru zenji no eka ni isso ari. Well, it takes some time to prepare this, but it's not impossible. And each time you do it, you get a little bit better. If you never do that, and you always ask the Japanese to do it for you, will never get to the point where you can read Dogen in the original. And well, the question is then, well, if after 3 years in Antaiji you still can't read Dogen in the original, you could have studied, like, say, in Tassahara or in the Jean Dronnier in France as well. And you could have studied Dogen Zenji in translation. So this is where you can find the Zuimonki if you're interested, at this ehezen.jimdo.com page. And if you want to read the Shobo Genzo, it would be shomonji.or.jp. And here on the left side, you got all of the chapters. You can click. The first one would be the Bendo, where there's the Genjo Koan. And the Gyoji would be here. There's two parts, the first part, the second part. Right now we're in the second part, and this is 2 days part here. And the difficult thing with the Shombon site, it's a little bit tricky. The tricky thing is, unlike this printed version, they use only the new characters, new Japanese characters. Like, for example, Hotoke. Today in Japan you write it like this, which is pretty easy. but the old way of writing it is like this. If you copy it and put it into Google, even Google will tell you that this is the same as this. But sometimes a little bit confusing. And with the Shomonji side, you might see it here on the screen. There's some characters which are actually pictures. Like here, you got this Butsu, and then you got a picture here, and then you got this men. And this one here you can't copy because it's a picture. The reason why they use a picture is that there's no code for this. So this is today you would write it like this, which means patriarch, but they want to use the old character, which looks just a little bit different, but because there's no code for this character, they use a picture. So if you work with a site, it's a little bit a pain in the ass to find all of these pictograms, because you can't just copy it. You can copy this one, but you can't copy the next one. If you copy these and try to look it up on Google, it will only give you the Hotoke one. The second one doesn't appear there. So, well, if you work with the internet, Shobogenzo in this case, the ones that are represented with pictures, you have to all look them up. For example, well, you have to use this parallel. But it's not an impossible job either. And let's look here at the original, or maybe I'll read once more from the English translation. I just read the Nishijima translation, maybe now I also read the Shasta Abbey translation. The Shasta Abbey translation of the first sentence is, "In that we have encountered Buddha and heard the Dharma today, we are indebted for the loving kindness evidenced by the ceaseless practice of each and every Buddha and ancestor." In that we have encountered Buddha and heard the Dharma today, we are indebted for the loving kindness evinced by the ceaseless practice of each and every Buddha and ancestor. Nishijima translated as "Our meeting Buddha and hearing Dharma in the present is benevolence that has come from the conduct and observance of every Buddhist patriarch." And now let's look at the original. Ima no Kenbutsu Monpo wa Busso Menmen no Gyoji Yori Kitareru Jion Nari. So it's only half a line actually. It's maybe 25 characters, which in translation become 3 lines. And if you don't speak no Japanese, it's all just gibberish to you probably, but it's actually not so difficult if you look at the original. First is imano, is all hiraganas, but ima is just the normal ima, means now. Imano. Ken butsu. Ken is also a simple character which means to see. And butsu, the next one, is the old character for Buddha. So ken butsu means seeing the Buddha. Mon means to listen, kiku, and ho means the Dharma. And if you don't know that, you can also copy that and just put it into Google. And this, there would be, Google would explain it to you in more simple Japanese. Of course, if you don't speak any Japanese at all, that's difficult, but if you speak like simple Japanese, like things like this, you just put in it, me ni hotoke o haishi mimi ni buppo o kiku. Basically seeing the Buddha with your eyes and hearing the Dharma with your ears. And also, if you don't know how to read these stuff, also it would be here in Hinaga, Kenbutsu Monpo. You don't have that in the text, but if you put it in Google, Kenbutsu Monpo. And pretty straightforward, Kenbutsu Monpo, seeing the Buddha, hearing the Dharma. Imano, that we see the Buddha and hear the Dharma in the present. Busso memmen no gyoji yori kitareru jion nari. Butsu is again the Buddha. So is a picture here, so you can't Google it, but it's the patriarch. Men means face, and there's face and there's another face, so it means face to face. The Buddhas and patriarchs face to face did gyoji, that's basically the title of the chapter here, practice. Maintain something through practice, or maintaining the practice. Yori means through something. Kitareru. Kitareru means in modern Japanese would be kuru, to come. So in this case it means because of. And ji is a character that you have, for example, in the Daijihi. Jihi means compassion. You often have that also in monks' names. Jinen, for example, was a monk who lived here a couple of years ago. Ji is compassion, and on is a character that appears over and over again in this section. On means favor, or if you receive a favor. So basically what this sentence then means, if you look at the whole thing, Ima no kenbutsu monpo, the fact that we right now can see the Buddha and hear the Dharma is a favor that we receive because of the benevolence that's at the end here. It's a favor received through the benevolence of the fact that the Buddha patriarchs from face to face continued with the practice. So our practice today is possible because the Buddhas one-to-one transmitted this practice and maintained the practice. If you look at the original and look up some of the words that you don't know, it's actually pretty straightforward, and depending on the person might be even much easier to understand than our meeting Buddha and hearing Dharma in the present is benevolence that has come from the conduct and the observance of every Buddhist patriarch, which is Nishijima's version, or in that we have encountered Buddha and heard the Dharma today, we are indebted for the loving kindness evidenced by the ceaseless practice of each and every Buddha and ancestors. That's the correct translation, of course, but with a certain amount of effort and study, you can also get it from the original. Ima no means right now, the present. Kenbutsu, seeing the Buddha, listening to the Dharma, is because of the Buddha's patriarchs face-to-face maintaining of the practice, their benevolence that made that possible. And the next sentence would be Busso moshi tanden sezu wa. Busso again is the Buddha patriarchs. Moshi means if. Also today's Japanese the same. Moshi means if. Tan means straight or simple, direct. Could also mean 1-to-1, 100%. Like in the Gakudo Yojinshi, Dogen Zenji uses the example of a fluid that is, how do you say, spilled from one container to the next. So you move water from one container to the next and you don't mix anything in there, also you don't spill it. That would be kind of 1-to-1 transmission. And in the Gakudo Yojinshi, Dogen Zenji uses that as an example how the Dharma is transmitted from one Buddha to the next Buddha. Busso moshi tanden. Den means to transmit. That's the old character. The new character would be that's how you write it today. So if you look it up in the Iwanami book, it would be this more simple character. But again, you can just copy it and put it into Google and you find out that this is actually the same as this. This means to transmit something. So tanden means to directly transmit something, or to transmit something without changing it. So it's 100% faithful transmission. Busso moshi tanden sezu. Sezu is a grammatical form that is also still used today in Japan, but not so often. In this case, now you would say shinakereba, if it was not. So there's a negation. The zu is kind of negating this. If the Buddha's patriarchs would not have transmitted it faithfully, one-to-one, and he's referring, of course, to the Gyoji. The fact that we can practice now is because the Buddha patriarchs practiced in the past. And because of their benevolence, today we can listen to Dharma and see the Buddha. If the Buddha patriarchs would not have done that one-to-one, then ika ni shite konjitsu, or you can also read this kyo. There's also something that you will often find in the tea meeting. You would say kyo no hokoku onegai shimasu. Basically, this is today. These two characters means today. Ika ni shite would be, in modern Japanese, would be more natural to say doshite, how. Ika ni shite kyo ni itaran. How would it have reached until today? Itaru means to reach, itaran. If the Buddha patriarchs would not have transmitted it faithfully, one-to-one, how would have reached it until today? The Dharma and the practice. So again, very straightforward if you look at the original text. And the translations, of course, are not wrong, but again, Shasta Abbey translation would be, had the Buddhas and ancestors not directly transmitted the Dharma to us, how could it possibly have reached us in the present? For some reasons, Buddhas and ancestors are written with capital letters, but also transmitted is written with capitals. Dharma is with capitals, and it, how could it? For some reason they capitalize it. And it gets this very mysterious sound because of this. How could it possibly have reached us in the present? Nishijima asks, if the Buddha patriarchs had not passed on the one-to-one transmission, how could it have arrived at the present day? And that's of course correct, but yeah, if you make the effort to look at the original, you can see that it's actually more simple as you would think, even if you look at this 800-year-old Kamakura Japanese. Ikku no on. On again is kind of a favor that you receive from somebody. Ikku means one verse. Ichi is one, of course, and ku means a verse or a sentence. So the favor of one sentence, the favor of one verse. Nao hosha subeshi. Hosha means to return a favor, to pay gratitude. Subeshi means that you should do something. So you should pay gratitude to even one sentence that you received as a favor. And Ippo no on now hosha subeshi. The same thing is repeated in this sentence, except that you don't have ku here, but you have ho. So before it was a verse, and here it's a dharma. One single dharma, the favor that you receive in the form of one single dharma, you should also repay that gratitude. And we might want to check with Nishijima. We should repay the kindness contained in even a single phrase. We should repay the kindness contained in even a single dharma. I han ya. I han ya is something that in the past the Japanese said a lot, and now you don't hear it so much. It means all the more. Like if A is true, then even more B is true. And this even more is expressed through this Ivanya. But here again, if you never heard about Ivanya, probably looking it up on Google would give you the translation. So here it's translated in Japanese. You could also try, if you write English behind the thing. Maybe it gives you the English translation. Iwan Shia, Iwan Sha. Ihan. Ihan Sha, that's different. Iwan Ya. What would happen if we put it in brackets? Or in this. Iwan Ya. Iwan Ya, Iwan Ya, but well, Google doesn't know it. Iwan Ya, well, here we're getting closer. Zenin to Akunin, Iwan Ya. Japanese English Dictionary, Gloss B. Iwanko, Ihanko, Ihyoshan. Kekkyoku no tokoro no to yu mono. Okay, sometimes it's not so easy. Iwaku. In this case, probably you have better chances if you replace this wa with this one. Iwanya. Still no success. Not to speak of, that's the meaning. So let alone, that's right. Not to mention, much more. So sometimes you have to experiment a little bit. In this case, we were successful because we replaced the ha with the wa, Ivanya, Ivanya. So what Google tells you here, say nothing of, not to speak of, let alone, not to mention is the right translation of this one. Ivanya Shobo Genzo. Shobo Genzo is the title of this book, and it means the true Dharma eye storage. So you can interpret that in a lot of ways, but it basically means the truth that was discovered by Shakyamuni when he practiced Zen under the Bodhi tree, and he saw the morning star on the morning of December 8th. And the truth that he discovered and that he transmitted, both through the practice of Zazen and through the sutras that he taught during his whole lifetime. And it's basically the same truth that Dogen Zenji tries to catch in his Shobo Genzo. Shobo Genzo Mujo Daiho no Daion. Mujo means, as you can see, mu is nothing and jo means higher or above. So there's nothing higher than Daiho, the big Dharma of the Shobo Genzo. The great Dharma of the Shobo Genzo, which cannot be surpassed. The unsurpassable great Dharma of the Shobo Genzo. Not Dai-on. Dai-on means big favor. Dai is big, on is favor. So not to speak of, Ivanya, not to speak of the big favor of the unsurpassable Shobo Genzo. Kore o hosha sezaran ya. How could we not repay that debt? How could we not be grateful for that and try to repay that? And again, we might want to check with Nishijima. How then could we fail to repay our debt of gratitude for the great blessing of the right Dharma I treasury, the supreme great method? I'm not quite sure where they got the method from. Method seems to be their translation of Ho, Dharma. Shasta Abbey translation. How much more should we repay our immeasurable indebtedness for the unsurpassed great Dharma of the treasure house of the eye of the true teaching? Yeah, so these translations, Nishijima and Shasta Abbey, they both write, but if you want to know where they come from, just look at this text, and with a certain effort you can see, oh, this is actually here. The unsurpassed is here, and here's the big Dharma, and there's the Shobogenzo. Ichinichi, again, very simple, one day. Ichinichi ni mulyo. So, mu is negation. Ichinichi. Ni, mu, and ryo is amount or measure. So mulyo means unmeasurable. You can't even measure it. It's an amount that's beyond measuring. And the next three characters are actually pretty difficult. So even Japanese, if you go to Hamasaka and ask a Japanese what do these three characters mean, they probably couldn't tell you. But again, if you Google it, probably you get, well, Wikipedia has obviously a whole article on it, and it tells you how to read it. Gogasha. Gogasha is the reading of it. And unfortunately, they don't have an English version of this article. But basically, Goga is the Ganges. Do you pronounce it like that, the Indian river?
I don't know.
No?
Ganges.
Ganges, okay. So it's the river Ganges, the Indian river. And the last of these three means sand. So the amount of sand grains of the river Ganges. That's a phrase that's often repeated in the sutras when they want to emphasize that it's a huge number. And there's, according to Wikipedia, there's two interpretations. One say it's number here, 10, how do you say this? Potentized by 52, or 10, the 56 potents of 10. So either way, it's a cosmic, huge number. And Dogen Zenji says basically mulyo, so the uncountable sand grains of the river Ganges. No shimyo, so there's something connecting to that. And shimyo, well, this character means life, and normally it's pronounced me, but in the Buddhist text it's pronounced myo. And the one before here, that's shin, that's the body. So it's basically the life of your body. And what he's saying here, suppose you had as many lives as there are grains in the river Ganges. Still, sten. Sten means to, even now today in Japan, you have this word steru, to throw away. Sten is here, sten koto, throwing away. Imagine you had so many lives as there are sand grains in the river Ganges. Still, you should throw them away today. Ichijitsu ni mulyo gogasha no shimyo sten koto. Throwing away as many lives as there are sand in the river Ganges today. This is what you should wish, nego. Negao means to wish, and beshi again is you should. So you should wish to throw away your life as often as there's sand grains in the river Ganges. What does Nishijima say? we should desire to forsake in a single day bodies and lives as countless as the sand of the Ganges. Or Shasta Abbey, all day long we should desire to give up our own lives, which have been as innumerable as the sands of the Ganges. 法のためにすてんかばねは、世世のわれら、かへりて礼拝供養すべし。Here there's a kind of difficult grammatical expression which I don't know from present day Japanese, this kabane wa. 法のために means for the Dharma, for the sake of the Dharma. Tame is something that you often use in Japanese. It means for something. Ho is the Dharma, and sten means again to throw away. And we could again look this up on Google, but also often you have an explanation here in the Iwanami version. It would be in the Iwanami version just in the beginning of page 361. Shikabane. Ah, ho no tame ni shiten kabane wa. This, according to the commentary here, means shikabane. There's one syllable obviously missing, or maybe at Dogen's times you didn't need that syllable. It's shikabane today, and shikabane means a corpse. Like, for example, in yoga there's this corpse position where you just lie down at the end usually of a practice period. In Japanese it's called the shikabane no pose, the posture of the corpse. And here, if you look at the original, you would hardly get the idea that he's talking about the corpse, because it's only kabane, the she is missing. But if you look at the commentary, they tell you that ho no tame ni shiten, so the corpse that you throw away, or the corpse that you sacrifice for the sake of the Dharma, ho no tame ni shiten kabane wa, 世世の我ら帰りて礼拝供養すべし。礼拝供養、礼拝 are, for example, the prostrations that we do in the Hondo. Tomorrow at the beginning of the session I will do 3, and then at the end all of us will do together 3 prostrations. That's what you call礼拝. And kuyo is an offering. For example, if you make an offering of flowers at the altar, that's also kuyo. If you put water there, or tea, or food, that's also kuyo. In the beginning of the Tenzo Kyokun, Dogen Zenji says it's the job of the Tenzo to kuyo, to offer meals to the Sangha. So there also these 2 characters, kuyo, appear. So Laihai and Kuyo together mean to make prostrations and offerings in reverence to something. Se. This is the se that appears, for example, in the word sekai, the world. You can also read this character yo. You might know that all of the characters have at least 2 readings, kunyomi and onyomi. The kunyomi would be yo, which means the world, the mundane world. Yo-yo no warela. We human beings in the mundane world would make prostrations and offerings. We should make prostrations and offerings. To what? To the corpse that has been sacrificed for the sake of the Dharma. So somebody who sacrifices his life for the sake of the Dharma, there's somebody who's sacrificed the life of the Dharma. It's our job as people in the world to revere that corpse. So even when that person is dead, we should pay respect to that person. And then here, Shoten Yujin, that's not referring to So here's a contrast between Sese no Wareda. We in the human world, the contrast is here to the heavenly beings. Shoten Ryujin. So in all of the heavens, the dragons and gods, tomoni, together. Tomoni means together, also often used in Japanese today. In all of the heavens, the gods and dragons together will kugyo soncho, means more or less the same as lai hai kuyo. They will also pay reverence and respect to this corpse. Shugo o sanle suru tokoro nari, and they will protect that person and praise that person. Doli sore hitsuzen naru ga yuゑに. So this is a principle that is necessarily so. Necessarily, somebody who gives away his life for the Dharma will be treated with respect both by us human beings and also by the gods in the heavens. And here, Saiten Chikkoku, do you know, that's India, Saiten, so it's in the west. And Chikkoku is an old character that is not in use in Japan anymore, but again, if you looked it up in Google, it would probably tell you that this is actually referring to India. Like here, again, there's the dictionary. You go here and yeah, in this case you get the English version. Chinese, Japanese, on toku, chiku. Chiku is the one that's usually used in Buddhist texts. But it doesn't tell you that it's India. It tells you it's a male given name, Atsushi, which is also true. So if you want to find the real meaning, you probably have to use these, look Google for these two characters together. Chikkoku. Here, that's a Chinese thing that would also probably mean India. So, okay, this is a more difficult, a hard one, where you might bite your teeth out for a while. But what you could do, for example, you look up this Chinese one. Of course, you won't speak Japanese, Chinese. I don't speak Japanese. But what you can do then is you copy this Chinese explanation. You look for Google Translator. Put it in there. And of course now it's Chinese, it's Japanese, but you have here Chinese. The other name of ancient India. So here it tells you that you finally get to the fact that this means India. So this one would be a case of where it's a little bit harder to find the original meaning, but Saiten means
what
Western lands.
When you put the whole sentence in Google Translate in Japanese?
Yeah, I mean it's Kamakura Japanese, so I doubt that you get anything intelligible, but I mean you can always try. So that would be Dogen's text. The West Heavenly Kingdom and the Brahmani Gate Act have a great reputation. In the West India County, okay, it tells you India. I mean, it's not West India, but actually Saiten and Chikkoku mean basically the same thing. So the West you don't need here. But in the India country, the skull is played and the skull is of the samurai warfare lord. Heard it ridiculously. Respecting the skull model of the person of this hearing. So, yeah, I mean, part of this is true. For example, skull is these two characters, dokuro, which are kind of difficult. if you wanted to look this up in the character dictionary, you had a hard time. You have to count the strokes and stuff like that. But this is Dokuro, it means skull. So he's talking about skulls in India. Saiten Chikkoku ni wa, so in India, that basically means in India. Dokuro o uri, dokuro o kau. What makes, what is here? The skull is played in the skull of the samurai warfare lord. Dokuro o uri, dokuro o kafu, Balamon are the Balamon, which means a Brahman. They made it into a samurai warfare lord. Uli means basically, ulu means to sell something, and kau means to buy something. That's also in use today. We have these two things here. Dokuro o uri means to sell a skull, and dokuro o kau means to buy a skull. Balamon no ho means, ho can mean dharma, but in this case probably it can also mean, how do you say, the habit of doing something, or kind of, yeah, the habit of the Brahmans. And I heard that this is actually even today the case in India, that practitioners of yoga, or are they called the sadhus, these kind of hermits and practitioners, if a sadhu has a reputation of having attained a really high level of spiritual enlightenment, then after he's dead, his bones sell for lots of money. People want to have the bones of this practitioners, and maybe the skull sells for the highest money. So there's obviously these kind of groupies around the sadhu, and after he's died, they kind of compete for the bones, and they sell these bones among themselves. And that was obviously already the case at the time of Dogen. So he's referring to this custom. So ho in this case probably means the custom of the Brahmans of selling skulls and buying skulls. Hisashiku fumon seli. So we've been hearing these rumors. Fu is the wind, and mon means to hear. So Dogen has never been to India, but he's heard it through the wind. So basically it's a rumor that he's been hearing. Hisashiku means a long time. So maybe he says, I've been hearing that for a long time, or he says that's actually been transmitted a long time ago already, these stories of Brahmans in India selling skulls and buying skulls. Basically, the point he's making here is if you read the rest, I already read the translation, basically explaining the point he's making. You're gonna die anyway, sooner or later. In 100 years, each of us, we will all be dead, and our heads will have turned to skulls. If we give everything to the way in this life, not that that is really a reason to give away your life, but if we do that, then people will even pay respect to our skulls when we're dead. If on the other hand we say, no, how can I give away my life? My life is so precious. In 100 years your skull will be lying somewhere in the hatake, and nobody's going to even give a fart. So Dogen Zenji is basically asking which option is better for you. Do you want to cling to your life now and people kick around your skull in a couple of years in the hatake, or do you want to give your life away now, and actually even the gods will pay respect to your skull and bones later? I mean, not that we should be really concerned about what other people think about our skulls and bones, but the more important point is you're gonna die anyway. You're gonna die anyway. How do you want to live this one day? Today you have only this one day. It's never going to come back. And from tomorrow for 5 days we're going to have a session. These 5 days will never come back to you. If you sit on the cushion and move around and I don't want to be in pain, I would rather be on the beach right now. Why am I doing this to me? And somehow the 5 days will pass anyway, yes, but maybe we would feel better about these 5 days if we just give everything of ourselves during these 5 days to the Zen, to the practice. And then in the end, Dogen Zenji is commenting about the cold and the heat. Right now it's kind of, temperature-wise, it's kind of the best time of the year. It's not too hot, not too cold yet, although it can be sometimes quite hot already in June. But he's saying neither the cold nor the heat will kill you. Neither the cold nor the heat kill a person. Neither the cold nor the heat will kill the Dharma. What kills you and what kills the Dharma is not practicing. So what will kill you, what will kill the way, is a lack of practice. And in the end he's talking about mugi and wallaby, wheat and bracken. There's the story of the Buddha at one point when he traveled through India with his disciples. One of the patrons had offered that he could stay in his place for 90 days, but he forgot to think about food, and for 90 days they had nothing to eat but wheat that was actually meant for horses. But still the Buddha didn't complain, and he and his disciples for 90 days ate this food that was meant for horses actually. And this wallaby thing is something that we ate a lot in April, and according to some Chinese legend, there was a tribe that lost in a war, and rather than become slaves of the other tribe that they lost against, they retreated to the mountains and survived only on this wallaby, on the bracken. So Dogen Zenji says here, Dozoku no shoshuku nari. So these are great examples, both from Do, practitioners of the way, and Zoku means lay people. Both from the time of the Buddha, that would Do refer to people of the way, and normal lay people have been practicing in this way. So we should learn from that. Chi or motome. Motome to means to long for something. Chi means blood, longing for blood. I think in this case he means longing for meat and stuff like that, like animal products. Chichi means milk. So don't... Again, Dogen Zenji at this time was contemplating to move to the mountains. Maybe, although he was a monk and his community consisted of monks, in the capital that there were ways to get donated meat, and sometimes a rich patron would treat them to milk and stuff like that. Again, it was the capital after all. While if they moved to the mountains, they were not sure on what to survive on. But Dogen Zenji says, well, if you look for blood and you look for milk, you will be just like Kichiku. Ki is a demon, and Chiku means a beast or an animal. Looking for blood and looking for milk is just like the demons and animals. Nara wa zaru beshi means you shouldn't learn from these. But tada masani gyoji naru ichijitsu wa shobutsu no anri nari. Rather, you should just simply practice for one day. Again, ichijitsu means one day, gyoji means to practice, tada means just, masani means to straight in this case, straightforward or directly. Just practice straightforward. one day, Shobutsu no Anri, and this will be the way the Buddhas, all of the Buddhas practice. So don't think about meat, don't think about milk, don't learn from the demons, but just practice for this one day, like the Buddhas did. Okay, so today I kind of explained the text in English while looking at the original. For those of you who don't know any Japanese characters and don't know hiragana as well, it might be, well, more or less impossible to follow. But if you already know the hiragana and you know maybe some characters and you know how to use Google, then it's not impossible. And if you actually invest this time, especially when you are in charge of the Zuimonki again, for example, you got the whole complete Zuimonki on the internet. I don't know where we are now, somewhere in the 2 section. All of this is in the internet. If you put it like this into Google Translator, it will only be nonsense, I guess. But if you look one by one, I will show you. When I was put up by the late Buddhist priest Keninji, the only poor man came and said, my home is poor and it runs for a few days of smoking. Where do they get the smoking here? Zetsuen. Well, it's basically that what he's trying to, it runs for a few days of smoking. Basically it says that my home is so poor that we can't even fire the stove in the kitchen for several days. So for several times we didn't have fire in the kitchen stove because we had nothing to eat. But even, well, you even get a certain idea of what he's saying here, and if you put them one by one, for example, here Koso is the late Buddhist priest. This is here. There's the late Buddhist priest, and this is the next 3 are here. This is Kenninji, stuff like that. It's not impossible to look it up, and thus, if you already have a certain amount of Japanese, month by month, you will learn more, and after a while, you also understand the structure of Kamakura Dogen's language, which is different from today's language, but it's not so difficult. It's not so impossible to understand if you make the efforts and look it up. Like here, if you wanted to know Kenbutsu Mompo, for example. There are several dictionaries here on the internet. What's that? Unrelated kanji. Here. Okay, so much for today. This is basically, as I already said, the final part of the section on Bodhidharma. In the next section, Dogen Zenji continues with the second patriarch. Okay. If there's any questions, anything you want to ask, please ask. 質問があればどうぞ何でも聞いてください。はい、お願いします。Please.
I have a question. At one point you talk about seeing the Buddha.
Yes.
What that would be?
Kenbutsu Mompo means literally seeing the Buddha and listening to the Dharma. So listening to the Dharma could be either at a Rinko or Teisho, or it could be, you can also read it in books. When he talks about seeing the Buddha, well, one meaning could be, right now we have temples, we have Buddha statues. And when you look at the Buddha statues, some people have maybe more of a connection there, and other maybe less. But even just looking at a statue gives you a certain impression of what a Buddha is like. It gives you an impression of the posture. But then again, I didn't make a point of that today, but when Dogen Zenji talks about the transmission from Buddha to Buddha, one meaning is the straightforward meaning from Shakyamuni to Bodhidharma, from Bodhidharma to Dogen, from Dogen to today. So human beings, teachers, and if you meet a teacher today, you could also say when you see a teacher, you're also seeing the Buddha, but in a different sense. Everything you see and everything you hear is an expression of Bodhidharma. So it's not only this lineage of patriarchs from Shakyamuni to today that's covered by the word Buddha, but when you hear a bird sing, you also encounter the Dharma there. Or when you see a tree in front of the Hondo. Like there was this guy, there's this famous koan. Somebody asked Joshu, a Chinese, very famous Chinese Zen master, what did Bodhidharma transmit? And Joshu says the cedar tree in the garden. Or sometimes it's translated as the oak tree. It doesn't really matter if it's cedar tree or oak tree. Obviously they had a tree there in the garden, and Joshu said, here, you see that tree there in the garden. Or Dogen Zenji, in the beginning of the Zuimonki, he says that Buddhas are like worms or frogs. So basically, anything you see can be a Buddha. Like seeing the Buddha means that you see the world with fresh eyes. And hearing the Dharma means you, maybe for the first time, you realize, oh, it's raining. How come I didn't hear the rain until now? The moment you hear the rain, you're hearing the Dharma. The moment you see that tree or that frog, you're seeing the Buddha. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a Buddha statue. It doesn't have to be an enlightened master that you have to encounter so that you can see the Buddha. It can be anything. But often for us, as the entrance, we need something that's more easy to, how do you say, discover. Like you can see anything, you can hear anything, and you can hear the Dharma then. But usually at first we need some explanation to get to that point. So I could imagine for most people it's easier to accept that, well, the Buddha statue that we have in the Hondo is a Buddha. And when you tell them, well, actually the worm in the Hatake is also a Buddha. Well, Dogen Zenji says that in Zuimonki, most people will say, well, but I don't see a halo with that worm. How come you call that a Buddha? Where's the halo? And well, Dogen Zenji says, well, as long as you ask that, you don't really understand what a Buddha is yet. You're not following your teacher. But so both are expression of Buddha. Both the worm and the statue, they're both a manifestation of Buddha, but probably for most of us, it's easier first to say the manifestation when we look at the statue. But again, seeing the Buddha and hearing the Dharma, you can do it anytime, anywhere. You can encounter the Buddha anywhere. So when I said in the beginning, it's thanks to the Buddha patriarchs, it's thanks to their practice that we encounter it. When you encounter the Dharma, when you hear a frog, it's also thanks to the frogs, it's thanks to the worms, it's thanks to the trees that we see, that we can encounter the Buddha Dharma anywhere. It's not only that lineage, one to the next, but everything you see right now is transmitting already the Buddha Dharma. Yes, please.
These are two Japanese-related questions. Just watching you read that.
Yes.
What does the nari indicate?
Nari means usually what in Japanese today would be des or da or de aru.
Okay.
Nari. Today in Japanese you also have this word naru, which means to become.
Yeah.
But in old Japanese, nari doesn't mean to become, but it is. Where do you have, for example, jion nari means it is the compassionate favor of the Busso in this case. Well, you have this all over the place. And in modern Japanese, it would be just jion dearu or jion des, if you had the kind of formal. Here, you in the end again, shobotsu no yori anri. Anri is the way of practice. This is the way of practice of the shobutsu, all Buddhas. Shobutsu no anri nari. This is the way of practice of all Buddhas. And yeah, in Dogen's text all over the place, here in the next sentence again, you would have the nari. You have it all over the place.
One more question. I just noticed also you said uri and kao, although kao was spelled ka and
Ka, fu. Yeah, and that's a problem you have when you read, for example, the Zuimonki in the Iwanami Bunko version. That's also a difference between the Shobo Genzo version and the Shobo Genzo Zuimonki. They are both published by Iwanami. But this one here has straightforward furigana, while the Zuimonki has, for example, for cow, in this case it's here, ka, fu. Do you know the Irowa poem?
No.
Irowa, it's the old, now it's a I U E o kaki kuke ko sashi sudise so, and the old Japanese, they had this Irowa ni ho e do. There's this poem, and I forgot in between, but and then it's the old I. How do you ui no okuyama? I don't even know how to get it out. In the old that ya yi yu ye yo. Anyway, so ui no okuyama, not this I but another I. Ui no okuyama, and then it's kefu ko hete. Iro wa ni oe do chiri nuru o. Let's look this up. I'm sure they have this on the internet. So that's a poem and sometimes attributed to Kobo Daishi, the founder of the Shingon sect. And it's the special thing about this poem is that it comprises all of the Japanese, what do you say, syllables, each one exactly once. There's 48 because there's also this syllable here that you don't use anymore, the e, and there's the one I that I just try to type into my words program, but it doesn't have it. So here you got this Wikipedia thing. Maybe there's somewhere where we can see it more easily. There's here you got it, and here you got, maybe here it's a little bit easier to see the meaning of the poem. Iro means colors, and ni oe do means to have a good smell. So colors don't have a smell, but the colors here could refer to the shiki sokuze, ku sokuze, shiki nyanya shingyu, formless emptiness, emptiness form. So iro is written with, if you write it with the kanji, with the same kanji as shiki, which means form. And ilo can also, but then refer to things of an erotic nature. So often when Japanese interpret this sentence from the Hanya Shingyo, Shiki Sokuze Kuku Sokuze Shiki, they explain it as every girl is beautiful when she's 20, but when she turns 80, she's an old lady and not so attractive anymore. That's Shiki Sokuze Ku. All beauty will become emptiness eventually. That's not the original meaning of the Hanya Shingyo line, but often Japanese interpret it like this because shiki, when you read it, ilo, means this kind of erotic attractiveness. So anyway, ilo wa nioedo means ilo, kind of outside beauty, also has a good smell. But chili nuru o means that it falls or drops like flowers. Like flowers in spring, they smell well, but eventually they drop. So basically what the poem is referring to here is kind of this, the 20-year-old beauty eventually will get older. Ilo wa nioedo. Here you got here you got the characters. Ilo wa nioedo. So this is the shiki of Shiki Sokuze-ku in the Hanya Shingyo. Chili no ro. Colors are beautiful and they smell well, but they will drop. Waga yo tare zo tsune naran. And if you write it with characters, this waga yo means our world. Tare zo means who. Tsune means be permanent. Who in our world would be permanent? Ui no okuyama. That's why I'm quoting this poem to you. You were asking about this ka-fu, kau, spelled ka-hu. Here you have these two characters, ke-fu, but you read them kyo. You read them kyo because they stand for this. Ui no okuyama kyo koete. Ui means it's the opposite of wu wei, kind of a Chinese word which means non-doing, just going with the flow. And ui is the opposite of that, kind of clinging to yourself and saying, I'm in charge, I'm doing this. When you make an action and you have a goal and you try to get that goal, that would be ui. Okuyama means the deep mountains. And koete means to go beyond them, and kyo means today. So today, let's go beyond the deep mountains of wanting something, clinging to the ego, and act out of this. Asaki yume mishi ei mosezu. Asaki yume mishi ei mosezu. Asaki means shallow, yume means dreams. Mishi is the negation of to see. So don't watch shallow dreams. Ei mosezo means to become drunk and wake up from your drunkenness. So the reason why I'm referring to this is because in old Japanese, today you would write kyo like this. Ui no okuyama kyo koete. Today would be like this, but in old Japanese it's like this, kefu. Or kau, today it's like this, and kafu. And if you make the effort to look at the Shobo Genzo Zuimonki in the Iwanamae Bunko, you have even modern Japanese often stumble because the Furigana follow this old style in the Zuimonki, in the case of the Zuimonki. In the Shobo Genzo, it's modern, so you don't have it with the Shobo Genzo, but with the Zuimonki you have to be careful because you have this kind of thing all over the place. For example, butterflies are called chocho in Japanese, and with hiragana it would be like this. If you write it with kanji, it's like this, but the hiragana are like this, chocho, like chi and a small yo, and to make it long you have a u, chocho, and this would be like this, tefu tefu. but you pronounce it chocho. And that's kind of a little bit mendokusai, you would say. You just have to learn that. There's nothing but learning that. I mean, it's actually the fact that you don't have that in modern Japanese makes Japanese pretty easy to learn. For example, compared to English, you never really know. For example, you have an I, you don't know if it's an I, it's an E, how do you pronounce it? If you grow up in an English-speaking country, then you all learn it by heart. But the only exceptions today is kind of the ha, which becomes a wa, and you got the he, which becomes an e. These are the only two exceptions I could think of now in Japan, where you don't pronounce something like you write it. But in the old days, they had a lot of this, or sometimes you got like kannon-san. For some reasons, they spelled it kwannon in the old days, but you don't pronounce it kwannon. It's kannon, ku-wa-ku-wannon for some reason. You got all these little strange things in old Japanese. But I mean, in today's section, it's not that it's appearing all over the place. I mean, you had it here, for example, awalemi. In this case, you have the ha, which is pronounced wa. And there was this case, iwanya, which is spelled ihanya. And you have to know that actually here, it's up here. If you want to look up this iwanya, you have to know that the ha is actually needs to be replaced by iwanya. The same, awalemi. Awalemi means to have pity. And if you copy it like this and look for it like this, probably you don't find anything. Ahalemi. Well, actually here, Google replaces it with awalemi. So this would be actually the right thing. Awalemi. But certain things, yeah, through practice and try and error, you find this. Kafu is cow, and kefu is kyo, tefu is cho, stuff like that. Why it's like this, I don't know, but. Anything else? Yes, please.
If we already have the manifestation of Buddha Dharma in the frogs and the worms, why would we need the patriarchs?
We need somebody to point us to that fact. I mean, every so many millions of years, somebody wakes up to the fact by themselves. Like they say Shakyamuni didn't have a teacher. He woke up to it by itself, and according to Blue Buddhist teaching, at one point Buddhism will disappear, but then in some 10,000 years or 100,000 years or a million years, somebody else is going to wake up. So it's not totally impossible to wake up to the fact, but it's much easier if you have somebody who points to it. It's probably, well, I don't know if it's a good comparison, but if a war happened and all of electricity and all books and everything was destroyed, is it possible that at one point we get again to this point where we are now? Like, for example, we would forget, for example, that even things like that water boils when you heat it to 100 degrees. Would it be possible to again get that knowledge? Yes, of course, but it takes a long time. While right now we learn that as kids, and we learn to integrate and differentiate stuff, even though we never use it, but we learn it when we're in high school. And it's possible because we have somebody who teaches us that. We could, in theory, grow up somewhere in the jungle. I have never met with a math teacher and still find out by ourselves how to integrate and differentiate a formula, but it's close to impossible, I guess. So, of course, there might be some genius who wake up to the fact that the sound of a frog is already the truth, but it's much easier if somebody points you to that and reminds you that, well, actually, you don't find the truth somewhere, but you're already in it. You're already in it. You need somebody to remind you over and over again, I think. Or at least it makes it much easier if you have somebody to point you to the fact. Is there anything else? Any other questions? If not, then I wish you a good session. Well, this time it's going to be 1 hour shorter. Only 69 periods. Say